And surely we can only imagine. And I thank the Lord for that. If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Genesis, chapter number 16. Book of Genesis, chapter number 16. And I'm going to try to speak for a little while this morning. Genesis chapter 16. And the blessing it is just to be here this morning. I thank the Lord for it. Grateful for His kindness. Appreciate Him loving us in order letting us come to the house of the Lord. And so I'm grateful. And when you get to Genesis chapter number 16, this whole chapter is full of great instructions for us. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm not going to be able to deal with the whole chapter, but I do enjoy this chapter. Perhaps we'll come back and preach on it later. But there are a number of lessons, just practical lessons through this chapter that we need to give attention to at some time. I was thinking there in the first part of the chapter right there, it said, Sarah, Abraham's wife, buried no children. Of course, you know the story between Abraham and Sarah and the promise that God had given to Abraham. And that Sarah was going to have a child. God was going to make a great nation of Abraham. But he's now an old man. And Sarah's pretty old herself. And so it looked like the promises are starting to kind of wane or grow a little bit dim. And sometimes in our lives we have the word of the Lord, but the word of the Lord doesn't have us like it ought to. And faith gets weak. And sometimes we're like Sarah. We want to try to help God out. You know, she fell into a real trap right here. And that trap is set for you and I also. There's a real danger in being caught up in the temporary and thinking that the temporary is permanent when it still is only temporary. And when Sarah thought of her barrenness, she thought that was a permanent situation. But it's not a permanent situation. God had already stepped in and God had already made promises. And so that temporary situation was not the permanent situation. And isn't it true in our lives how sometimes we'll sacrifice the permanent on the altar of the temporary? And the Lord help us to keep our eyes set upon what He has said. She gives Hagar, her handmaiden, to Abram. And Abram goes into Hagar and she conceives. And of course it starts a strife. It starts a little bit of discontent, whether it was jealousy on Sarah's part because she couldn't have a child, and Hagar, the younger, was strong and able and fit, and God blessed her to have a child. I don't know what caused the jealousy, but there was a jealousy there, and Sarah goes to Abram, and she said, "No, I was wrong, but you were wronger. You were more wrong than I was. You didn't have to take her, you know." And Abraham's caught in a rock and hard place right here. He's in a no-win situation. He's going to lose either way, so, you know, unless God just does something. And so Abraham does the only thing that a reasonable, logical, walking above ground man could do. He said, "Well, honey, she's your handmaid. Do whatever you want to," you know. And Sarai sent her away. And Hagar, when she found a well, just about ready to perish, she prays. And God, the angel of the Lord, came, found her, and God dealt with her, and God spake with her, and God helped her. Verse number 7 said, "The angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain on the way to Surrey. He said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence camest thou? Whither wilt thou go?" She ain't got nowhere to go. She said, "I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said unto her, "Return to thy mistress, submit thyself under her hands." And the angel of the Lord said unto her, "I will multiply thy seed exceedingly. It shall be numbered for multitude, shall not be numbered for multitude. The angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and thou shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thine affliction. He will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man's hand against him. He shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. And she called on the name of the Lord that spake to her, Thou, God, seest me. For she said, I have also here looked after him that seeth me. I've been looking for you all my life. Thou, God, seest me. I'm going to stop reading there, and I want to call your attention to verse 13. Thou, God, seest me. You know, I can't help but realize that in this chapter, just by way of note, that Hagar is a picture of the law. And of course, Paul refers to this in the book of Galatians, speaking of Hagar, Mount Sinai, the law. And you and I have not come under that law like that, but by the grace of God, we've come to New Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem. And the law was cast out. And the law now, I'm not going to say the law is not good, for the law is good. But you and I, by the grace of God, have been elevated to a higher principle. And that principle is the grace of God. And I bless the Lord for that. But I was thinking about this chapter. Years ago, I heard Brother Knoweth make a reference to this. And he said that spiritual Abraham took some carnal advice and had come into the flesh. And in the energy of the flesh produced an Ishmael. And Ishmael was a wild man that always mocked the promised seed. Of course, Ishmael is a product of the flesh. And all that the flesh can do and all that the flesh will do is proved to be a curse to us. O wretched man that I am. This flesh is a curse, and we're in it, but we don't have to be servants to it. And we don't have to take and, walk in the energy of the flesh. Now, I was thinking about this, and just in passing. You know, I can see Abraham playing with that boy. I can see him loving that boy. I can see him patting his hands and little Ishmael jumping in his daddy's arms. I can see him walking down through the woods and by the rivers and throwing in and out of the tents and just playing. And I don't know if they played baseball, but I'm sure Abraham played a little baseball with Ishmael and pitch and all of those kind of things. And I expect he had a red Alabama jersey by the time he was 8 years old. You know, I expect all of that. But the truth is, there come a day when God was going to take and give to Abraham Isaac the promised seed. And then later on in his life, he was going to call for Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. But before Abraham could ever sacrifice Isaac, he had to give up Ishmael. Yes. And he loved Ishmael. Now when God requires those sacrifices from you and I, our most loved thing, and our bodies even, as the sacrifice unto the Lord, which is our reasonable service, before we can ever offer that which is precious and which God has given us to give back to Him, we're going to have to offer up our flesh. We're going to have to give up those things that our flesh craves and that our flesh has drawn near to over the years. And so I just offer that to you just by way of going through that chapter. There's some tremendous truths that are there locked up for us. But I want to draw your attention to verse 13. Hagar says, Thou, God, seest me. Thou, God, seest me. I want to talk a little bit about divine omniscience this morning. I've had the word omnipotent on my mind, but divine omniscience this morning. God's knowing. God's all-knowing. Now, there are a few things that I recognize by way of introduction. I recognize that this morning there are more eyes on you and I fixed upon us than what we realize. Sometimes around the house, Sister Kathy Hayes first made us conscious of this idea, but some around the house we'll be talking about something, maybe political, maybe different, you know, and Sister Ann will stop and she'll say, now that was Brother Ralph Coleman that said this. I am Ann Coleman. I did not say it, because there's somebody listening. Big Brother is watching you. And, they're conscious of it. Every now and then Siri will come on the phone, and she looks like she's listening in to our conversation, watching what's transpiring. Well, there are eyes that are fixed upon us, and there's more watching you than not watching you. I thought about the angels. Angels are continually beholding those of us that are heirs of salvation. Amen. Those of us that are the God's young ones, the angels are watching us. They're constantly beholding what you're doing and what you're not doing. And I was thinking what Jesus said about the little children. He said their angels are before the Father, you know. And angels are watching you and watching me. And there's been several occasions in everyone's life where it was the angel that stayed that car from running off the road, or it was maybe that angel that stopped the flight of something that would have stricken you and taken your life. And God surely and wonderfully has caused the angels, who were sent to be ministers of those that were to be heirs of salvation. He's allowed the angels to look into our world and step in occasionally on our behalf. Then again, I think about the fact that not only have angels continually been watching us, but there's been a great cloud of witnesses in heaven that's watching us. I believe heaven's interested in what's going on right now. I believe there are times when those that have gone on before look over the battlements of heaven and do a cheerleading session for us. Go ahead on. Keep on. Don't turn around. Don't back up. We're looking from this vantage point, and you're right at the victory line. Just keep on marching, you know. Yeah. And I see the encouragement we get from seeing that great cloud of witnesses over on the other side. I've got some over there that I know they're thrilled that I'm still preaching, that I'm walking with them. I know they're thrilled about it, and they're encouraging us, and their very memory encourages us. But I think there's some folks on this side that are watching us. I believe that there are folks that are watching you. There are young'uns in the church that are watching you men and you women. And there are children that's watching us. You know, our grandchildren and our children, they watch us. Your wife and your husband, they watch each other. And Brother John, people are watching us. They're watching us. And so they have their eyes upon us. And the truth is, no man liveth unto himself, no man dieth unto himself. We're not an island. And so there are eyes upon you. And just like Walker's Texas Ranger, the eye is upon you, you know. And so we're being watched. But you know, as much as men are watching and women are watching, angels are watching, what ought to really have an impact upon our heart is the fact that God's watching. Amen. Thou, God, seest me. Now I want to deal with this truth for just a few minutes. I want to speak of this truth or this doctrine in a general type way. And then I want to take and make some specific applications. And then I'd like to make a few references as to how it deals with you and I as individuals at the last. But I want to talk about this in a general type way to begin with. Because God is omniscient. The very fact that God sees all. Thou, God, seest me. God sees. And that idea of the eyes is that God is all-knowing. He's omniscient. He's the God of all knowledge. And I'm glad that it's not that God is knowledge. That God is the God of all knowledge. Men worship knowledge because knowledge is power. Men think the more they know, the more power they can have, and there is some truth to that. But I want to tell you, all the power that man has is nothing when you compare it to the omnipotence of God. All the knowledge that man may possess is nothing in comparison to the knowledge of God. And God is knowledge. Ehud told him, he said, now God is perfect knowledge, perfect in knowledge. He is perfect in knowledge and has perfect knowledge of all things. I picked up a definition by a fellow by the name of Wayne Grudem. And Wayne Gruden's a theologian and has some very good books. But he has a definition concerning the omniscience or the knowledge of God. And he says, God fully knows himself and all things actual and possible, in one simple act, an eternal act. Now that's a good definition. Now, he says several things about that definition. Let me point out 2 or 3 things about it. First of all, he said God fully knows himself. Now, that in itself is bigger than you and I can imagine. We have finite minds, limited minds. We can only know so much. Our little brain can't comprehend a whole lot anyhow. But we are very limited, even the best of us. God is infinite. He's the only infinite. And friend, that means that God is infinite. He only can know infinite. Infinite, if it is to be known, is known by infinite. And so God is infinite. He fully knows himself. And God alone knows himself. That's just beyond us. That's bigger than our pay grade. We're not able to see. Now, you wouldn't know about what some men think. They think they know everything. But it's not so. Only God fully knows God. Over there in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter number 2 and verse number 10, it said, the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. That is, the innermost recesses, the depths of God. The Spirit searches. For what man knoweth the things of man, save the spirit of man that is in him? That is, one person cannot really, truly know the depths of another person. His thoughts, his heart, his intents, those inner sanctum things about an individual. One person can't really know that. Now, you can know a lot of things about a person. You can appreciate or not appreciate things about a person. You see the way he acts, what he does, what he says. But you really don't know what's on the inside. No man knows that but that man. It's reserved knowledge, if you please. Even so, the things of God knoweth no man, the apostle says. That is, man cannot comprehend. He cannot understand. He doesn't have the capacity to know the thoughts of God. He said that the Spirit of God does. And so God fully knows himself. That is something that we cannot know and do not know apart from divine revelation. You and I live in darkness in comparison to the knowledge of God. And if God turns on the light, we may catch it just a glimpse, just a beam, just a flash. But God, as far as himself, can only know himself. We are so limited in our capacity in knowing God. Then, secondly, concerning this little thought, this little truth, all things, he knows all things actual and all things possible. That is, he knows all things that exist. Everything that exists, God knows it. He knows all things that will happen. He knows all things that might happen. Things actual and things that are possible. He knows the created universe. All things are naked and open in the eyes of him that we have to do. He knows all things that are actual. He created this thing. He made this thing. He not only drew the plans and the outline, but he executed those plans. He spake and it was. God in his divine wisdom understood before anything ever was and then caused it to be as it was. He called something out of nothing, and he knew what the nothing was when he called something out of it. And so God actually knows all things possible, all things that are probable, all things that might and all things that might not transpire and happen. You know, you take, for instance, Jesus saying concerning Jerusalem, he said, now if Tyre and Sidon had witnessed what you've witnessed, have seen the miracles you've seen, heard what you've heard, they would have repented a long time ago. But they didn't hear it, they didn't see it, and they didn't repent. God knows all things possible and all things that might not happen. What happens, what doesn't happen, he knows it. Over there in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 13, Elisha has gotten sick, and Syria has oppressed Israel, and little Joash has come to the throne, and he's on the throne. He's listened to the man of God for some years now, and Elisha is sick, and now he sees that this thing is going to be really bad if the man of God is not there. He goes to the man of God and he said, oh, Elisha, horse chariot of Israel, you know, the one that's carried us and pulled us through. And the man of God, the arrow of deliverance, you know, he says, what are we going to do? And Elisha tells him, he says, listen, he says, put your hand on the bow and take an arrow and shoot it out the east window. And he did. He shot the arrow out the east window, and he said, God is going to take and deliver you. And this is an arrow of deliverance for you. Boy, what a tremendous thing that was for you, little Joash. And he said, now take the arrows and go down yonder and beat the ground. Joash took the arrows, went down there and beat the ground 3 times. Come back up and told the man of God. And the man of God scolded him. He said, man, why in the world didn't you beat the ground 5 or 6 times and had complete victory over Syria instead of just 3 victories or 3 deliverances and so on. So God knows what will happen. He knows what won't happen. And nothing's caught God by surprise. He knows everything actual and everything possible. Then again, God knows in one simple act all that transpires or shall transpire. That is, he doesn't know it in part. He knows it in whole. One simple act. Now we know in part. We learn in part. We see in part. We learn our ABCs. Then we learn how to put ABCs together and spell cat and dog and dick and run. And then we put these words together, see, dick, run. See, dog, chase, cat. And then we make a paragraph, you know, and then tell a story. Not so with God. He did not learn ABCs, 1, 2, 3, and then put them together. No, God doesn't know in part. We even know our Bible in part. Precept upon precept, line upon line. Here a little, there a little. But not so with God. God knows in one simple act everything of all ages that there ever has been, shall be, could be. Amen. God knows all things. And he knows them all at one time. He is fully aware of everything. He does not have to be taught. He knows all there is to know at once. And he doesn't have to reason. He doesn't have to ponder. He doesn't have to speculate. His memory is never weakened. It's never flawed. It never grows dim. And he forgets only those things he chooses not to remember.
Right. Amen.
Now, he said he would remember our sin no more. You and I don't have that ability. God has that ability. We have the ability, and practice it often, to forget. Now, you know what forgetting means, don't you? It means I go to the store, and I've got a list. And in that list, I'm supposed to pick it up, but I left my list at the house. And so from my memory, I begin to fulfill that list as best I can. And boy, I'm so proud of myself that I've got everything on that list until I get to the house. And as I'm pulling in the driveway, I say, oh man, I forgot. Yeah. If you just forget something, you're subject to calling it back. at any time.
Yes.
But if you were able, and we're not able, but if we were able to choose not to forget, that would mean that it was not subject to being recalled again. And concerning our sins, He has chosen not to remember our sins. So if there's sins and iniquities, I will remember no more. Meaning that God chooses not to remember them. He has cast them away. They're not to be brought up against us again. God has forgotten them. You remember, the devil remembers them. Your husband or your wife might remember them, but God does not remember them. He's cast them away. He's chosen to forget them, not to remember them anymore. Thank God, thank God. But I'm simply saying this. He doesn't know in part. He knows completely the whole. And it's not a flaw in His memory because He's omniscient, but what He chooses to forget, He forgets. Amen. He remembers it no more. Then I want to say He knows everything in one eternal act. That is, God's knowledge never changes. He never learns anything. His memory never grows. It never gets more. It never lessens. He never learns. He knows what He'll do in every situation and is already predetermined and knows beforehand what shall transpire. And that makes everything that transpires absolutely certain. Everything is certain with God. Now, I walk around sometimes and scratch my head and say, I wonder what I'm going to do here. Or I wonder what I'm going to do there. What in the world are they going to do? But never has God ever had to wonder about anything. He knows in eternity what has transpired before time, in time, and shall transpire after time. Now, having said that general idea, let me say this about this knowledge of God, or about the omniscience of God. Let me say, first of all, the omniscience of God can be proven by the nature of God Himself. When you think of God, you cannot conceive of a God that does not know everything. It's beyond our ability to conceive of a God that does not see or know what's going on. Theos, God, to know, to see. God is all-seeing, all-seeing. The prophets spoke about, in picturesque language, the 7 eyes of God. Ezekiel made reference to his celestial beings as having eyes, able to see, moving constantly. And the Lord sees. You know, even the false gods that men create, and that they build with their hands, that they sculpture and they carve out, even false gods have eyes. The other evening, we watched one of those programs where the Indians up in Alaska, the Eskimos, and in their little village they had a totem pole. I think that's what they call them, totem poles. And the totem poles had big eyes on it. Even false gods are given eyes, because men cannot conceive of a God that cannot see and know. It's impossible to comprehend a God like that. Now, I was, some passages in the Bible just seem to stick out to you more than others. Over here in the book of Job, there's a passage that just, in my heart, just blesses me to contemplate. Job chapter number 28. Listen to this. Verse number 7. There's a path which no fowl knoweth. That is, no bird in the heavens. As they don't understand this path. The bird in the heaven flies through the sky, and we think perhaps, he's just wandering around. But not true. It's going down a certain path. But there's a path even in the sky, in the heavens, that the bird doesn't understand. He doesn't know about it. In which the vulture's eye hath not seen. The vulture's eye haven't seen this path. The lion's whelps have not trodden it, nor the fierce lion passed by it. Not even the lion knows the path that we're talking about right here. He putteth forth his hand upon the rock. He turneth over the mountains by the roots. He cutteth out rivers among the rocks, talking about the power of God. And then he says this, and his eye seeth every precious thing. God's eyes behold. He sees the precious things of the earth. Now we dig for gold and silver. We mine out iron. We have diamonds. We have all those things that we call precious things. But God has treasures in the snow. And he sees the treasures in the snow. And he sees the precious things of the earth. And he sees treasures in the waters, in the rains. God sees all of that. His eye sees it. And we would not conceive of a God that could not see and know all things. I think you can prove the omnipotence of God by the very idea of omnipotence itself. I mean by that, you know, the Apostle Paul, over in Acts chapter number 17, the Apostle Paul there at Mars Hill, those folks around Mars Hill, Martians is what I call them, those Martians had taken and raised up all kind of gods, and they had them everywhere, you know, and all of them had their eyes on everything. And then in case they missed one, they made an idol to the unknown God. Paul walked into that crowd and he said, now listen, that's who I want to talk about. The very God that you do not know is the one I want to speak to you about. And he said, it's this God in whom we have life, and we move, and we have our being. Amen. It is this God that knows all about us. Amen. It's this God that has given us life, and it's this God that knows our very existence. Now, over there in Psalms 139, let me read you a few verses out of Psalms 139. It says, O Lord, and you just take reference to the things here. It speaks about God as knowing. Thou hast searched me and known me. Thou hast known my downsettings, my uprisings. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, art acquainted with all my ways. Lord, you know where I'm camping out. You know where I'm making my bed tonight. You know, you're acquainted with everywhere I'm going through the daytime. There's not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost part of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, thy right hand shall hold me. How are you going to run from God that knows where you're going to be? He's before you and he's behind you, and there's nowhere you can escape him. He knows where you are. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike unto thee. Thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee, when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members were written, which are in continuance were fashioned, when I was yet there, there was none of them. How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. In other words, David says God knows me. He knew me while I was being formed as a baby, even before then. There's not been a day or a place or a time that God has not been conscious of me. And I want to say to you, What a wonderful knowledge. God omniscient. You can't get away from that. He knows all things. David said, I'm conscious that you know all those things. I was thinking right there, it said, verse number 12, the darkness hideth not from thee. John said that the darkness, or men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. Yeah. And I was thinking that's where God found us, in the darkness of night, and brought us out of night into the daylight, out of night into the daylight, because He knew where He was. And so I may be lost, but He's not lost. He knows exactly what He'll do. And I just bless Him for that. His omniscience, dear friend, God would, just the very fact that He possesses it, you can't help but to see Him as the God of all knowledge. Then again, I think about this omniscience. He can be proved by God's activity. I mean by this, God's not asleep. There's nothing catching Him by surprise. This carnivorous virus, it ain't stopped God. It ain't stubbed His toe, brother. And He's watching over us. And if He's watching over, and He neither slumbers nor sleep concerning Israel, don't you know the Lord is concerned about His church? And I bless Him for that. I thank Him for that. The Hebrew writer said this, all things are upheld by the word of His power. He knows what's transpiring there. Colossians said, by Him all things consist. That is, they are held together. They're bound. It's not the protons and neutrons and electrons that are holding this thing together. Yes, we're held together. Everything that has mass is made up of molecules. Yeah. And these molecules, dear friend, are all constantly revolving. How in the world do they stay together? God holds them together. Yeah. God holds the atoms together. Your very life and my very life is held in His hand. Oh, isn't it true? There was a song back years ago. He holds the whole world in His hands. The whole world in His hands. Got you and me, brother, in His hands. I'll tell you, He's got our very life in His hands. And were He for a moment to just stop, friend, I'll tell you, we die, we perish, we'd be no more. Let Him turn the air off in your life. Shut the lungs down. You'd suffocate. You'd be gone. Let Him turn that heart off. You'd be gone. If He just turned a little shut-off valve in that heart, your life's over, friend. I'm telling you, God's able to do anything He will. And His very activities prove Him to be God. Not only that, but I was thinking about His foreknowledge. His foreknowledge. Have you ever considered that before things transpired on the scenes of history, God, thousands of years before it transpired in history, God prophesied. God foretold it. God said, now this is what's going to happen, this is what it's going to be. Even at times naming individuals. He foretold judgments. He foretold Calvary. Sometimes we think very cruelly of the Roman soldiers that hung Christ upon the tree. But God foretold it, and God foreordained it. And this is what God said would transpire. God knew the end from the beginning. And He knew everything that was in between. God is an omniscient God. He knows things past, present, and future. He calleth those things which are not as though they were. We know in the process of time. That's how we know things. As time goes on and it reveals and it shows to us different things, shedding light, turning things dark, we understand according to the process of time. But God knows beyond the process. Yes. He knows without the process. God's not limited to person or place. Amen. Time. He's not limited to time. And He knows all things at one time, and He knows them in one simple act, everything. And in fact, He knew it before the foundation of the world. Before time ever came into the picture, God already knew what was transpiring. He sees the events as one unified whole. We only see in part. We only know in part. And God sees the whole. And He had seen it before it ever transpired.
Yes.
Now, having said that, and I say very simply, having said that, because there are so many other things to be said, but let me take for just a few moments and say a word about this truth in its special relationship to you and I. For it's not only that God knows everything in general, you know, God knows all things. That's something we can say. He's the God of all knowledge. But the passage said, "Thou, God, seest me."
Yeah.
God sees you. Now, I appreciate getting to preach to crowds. This has been a little bit different, just preaching to, you know, just a few, 5, 6, 8, 10. And I guess I've been trained in that because that's been about the size of my outfit anyhow. You know, I can take a big crowd and whittle it down real quickly. And so, but the truth is, there's a real joy in preaching to crowds. And I preach to some large crowds, and I preach to small crowds. But there's some real great disadvantage to preaching to large crowds. I love for the church house to be full every service. I love to preach to them all. But I remember reading in the scripture where Jesus sent the disciples on ahead so that He could sit down there by the well and preach to just one little woman.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you lose that personal touch. He walked through the town and there was throngs of people all around Him, and He singled out Zacchaeus. And He said, "Zac, come on down. I'm coming to your house today." I'm reminded that He calls His sheep by name.
Amen.
One on one.
Amen.
God seeth me. He sees you personally.
Yes.
Now, with that in mind, I want to say God sees you as if there was no one else in all the world.
Amen.
That is, you look at the person next to you and you have an affection for them, or an admiration for them, and rightly so, thank God for that. But I want to say to you, God sees you as if you were the only one in the room. You're the only picture on His refrigerator. God sees you as if there was no one else that existed. Now, our mind divides. That's the way our mind operates. It divides. It lists, or it catalogs, or it prioritizes, you know. And so 1, 2, 3, and that's the way we have to function. But not so with God. God's mind is infinite, and He sees it all at once. And He sees you as you and you alone. He sees you as if no one else existed. And He doesn't have to make a list. He doesn't have to check it twice. He doesn't have to look your name up in a catalog. He doesn't have to take and see where you might be. He sees you as the only one on this terrestrial ball. You, thou, God, seest me as if there were no one else in all the world. But not only does He see you as just you and no one else, but I tell you, God sees you entirely. Entirely. I mean, He sees your thoughts. He knows what you're thinking now. He knows what you thought last night. He knows what you thought last week. God sees your thoughts. He's conscious and aware of your intentions. He sees your intentions. He knows what makes you tick. He knows your motives, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether your thoughts are good, whether your thoughts are bad, whether your intentions are honorable or they're dishonorable. God sees you entirely. He sees your heart. The scripture says, man looketh on the outward appearance, but God looketh upon the heart.
Yeah.
He sees you entirely. As if there's no one else in this world. He sees you. And what really makes you up. What's on the inside of you. Then I'll tell you something else. He sees you constantly. What you say, what you do, how you feel, that may be hidden from the eyes of men. We are great cover-ups. We really are. And so it may be hidden from the eyes of men, but all things are naked and open to God. He has an all-seeing, all-penetrating eye that is constantly upon you. And not only does he see you constantly, but he also sees you supremely. He knows you supremely. By that I mean this. He knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say, you know, if I know myself, if I know my heart. You know. But the truth is, I don't know my heart. And God knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows us better than our friends know us. I have some precious and wonderful friends in this world. And I thank God so very much for them. In fact, I had a friend visit us here some few weeks ago. And when we were parted, you know, we were thanking God for our friendship. And he said something to me, and I just cherish it. He said, well, Brother Ralph, when God introduced our hearts to each other, he said, till death do us part. And I bless the Lord for that. And I think this morning about other friends that I have. Brother Ernie Emmons, what a wonderful friend Brother Ernie is to me. And there have been several occasions when Brother Ernie stood up and purchased something for me, or he said, Brother Ralph, be interested in that. And he went ahead and made a decision for me. And the reason he did is because he knows my heart. And he knows me. And I'm thankful for such a friend as Brother Ernie Emmons. I bless the Lord for him. And others, you know. And I thank God so very much. God knows us better than we know ourselves. And as good as we might know our friend, or our friend may know us, God knows us better than our friends. He knows me better than my precious wife knows me. And he knows her better than I know her. He knows us better than our friends do. He knows us better than our foes do.
Yeah.
Now this media thinks they know Donald Trump. They don't know Donald Trump. They're all the time looking for something to nitpick at him about, you know. Jump on anything in the world, but they don't know him. We don't know him. But God knows him. Now I'm looking at you this morning, my eyes resting upon you. And I think I know some of you. I may know your name, you know, and a few little odds and ends like that. But the truth is, there are eyes that are beholding you and beholding me that really know us. And to emphasize it like our grandchildren, we really, 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 really know. God really knows us. Then let me make some application of this truth to our hearts this morning for just a few minutes. Let me apply this truth to our hearts for just a minute. Well, what does it mean to us as a child of God in our prayer life? For those of us that pray, the Lord knows we need to pray more. But I want to encourage you, the fact that God knows helps us in our prayerfulness. Just keep on praying. Keep on praying. He can read those inward desires of the heart. He knows what's transpiring in your soul. He knows the longing. He hears. He hears what's not even being told. He knows the groanings, unuttered words. He knows. So just keep asking Him. In fact, the Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. Lay them out before him.
Amen.
Come like Hezekiah. Spread the letter out in his presence. Lord, Lord, you see it, you know it. Help us. Help us. To the prayerful, what an encouragement it is that God knows. You're not giving him a report. You're just making known your heart.
Amen.
Then, secondly, there are many in the Christian faith that are just full of care. They care about everything, concerned about everything, and to such a degree that they're anxious, worrisome. Now, I'm sure that's not any of your trouble, but there are folks that they just can't get beyond worrying about everything. They just wring their poor little hands off, and because they're worried. And if they haven't got enough worry for today, they're going to borrow you a little bit so they can worry about it. And they worry about your stuff, and they worry about their stuff, and they worry about stuff that they have no idea about. They're constantly care-filled. The Apostle Paul said not to be careful for nothing. Don't be so full of care that you miss God. But the Lord knoweth. I'm comforted in this, that he knoweth the way that I take. Yeah. He knows the way that I take. He knows my down settings. He knows my uprights. He's acquainted with my griefs. He knows my sorrows. He knows the burdens that I'm going to carry. That's why he said, cast your cares, your burdens upon the Lord, for he careth for you. He knows what you can take, what you can't take. I was thinking about Brother Job. The Lord told Satan, he said, where you been? He said, I've been out on the earth. And he said, I've been walking to and fro. He said, I've been trying to stir mischief up here, mischief up there. And it was God that suggested, have you considered my servant Job? He said, well, I considered him. I went by his house the other day, but you had a hedge around him, and so I knew I couldn't get up there to him. He said, well, but if you take that hedge down, he'll curse you. He said, oh, no. He said, get the hedges down, go on down. Try not, just save his life, don't touch his life. Boy, Satan did his best. Job never cursed God, spake foolishly against God. God knew that. Careful. Those that are full of care and concern, anxiety. God knows what he has. I was thinking about those that, the world has slandered some of God's people. Said ugly things about them. Jesus said in the world you're going to have that kind of thing transpire. We ought to be thankful. We ought to be thankful that God knows the truth. And he ain't telling nobody. Mm-hmm. We ought to be grateful that our enemies don't know any more about us than they do. Isn't that right? Because if they really knew us like God knows us, brother, they could surely hurt us. But thank God. Though they speak hard and vicious words against us, we bless the Lord. They only know part of the story. Yeah. Thank God he knows all the story and loves us anyhow. Yeah. Hallelujah. Then there is, of course, those that don't know the Lord. Those that are sinners is what the Bible calls them. The ungodly, even the wicked. I want to say your life is like is so transparent before God. We have, back when I was a boy, we had little old projects every once in a while. Ours had these kind of projects in science. They have 2 glasses. And those 2 glasses, you put some dirt in it, you dump a few ants in it. And you got an ant farm. And boy, they'll make little tunnels and everything. You can watch all what the ants do. Here some years ago, Sister Ann come home and she had a birdhouse that had a black glass back. Put it upside the window, and you watch the little bird go in and lay its egg, and watch the little birds grow and everything like that. I've heard of beehives. They were glass beehives so they could study bees. And they put the bees in a glass beehive making their honey. And boy, that'd been something. And I tell you, God sees every man's life like a glass ant house,
Yes, sir.
or a beehive, or a bird box that has a glass back to it. He sees all the activities going on by sinners. Condemnation is not going to be hard to uphold because God himself is an eyewitness of the wickedness that sinners have done against him. Thou, God, seest me. I'm glad he does. There's an old song back years ago. I believe it was Ethel Waters that sang that old song. But here's how it went. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart grow lonely, longing for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is he. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. His eyes on the sparrow, I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I was reading the other two refrains. It said, let not your heart be troubled. His tender word I hear. Resting on his goodness, I lose my doubts and fears. Though my path he leadeth, but one step at a time I see. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Whenever I'm tempted, whenever clouds arise, when songs give place to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From care he sets me free. His eyes on the sparrow, I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. Thou, God, seest me. This is the God I've been looking for all my life, that God says. Thank God we can know him. Amen. Let's bow. Our Father, as we look to thee, grateful for the tender mercy thou hast shown us. Lord, tonight, we're not afraid of your presence. We stand in awe and reverence of it. We realize that our blessed Lord Jesus has robed us in the best garment of his own self. And as you are satisfied with him, so you're satisfied with us. Because you love him, you love us. We've been washed in the blood, sanctified and sealed by the Spirit. And you're so conscious of us. We love you this morning. I pray that you'll be with each one here. Bring us into more, greater understanding of your divine presence. May we live in the light of the knowledge that you know us and love us. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. The Lord bless you. Thank God so much for you.